told me sooner. So this is Spanish tourism and the idea that they presented for this concept. And here's a few behind the scene images from Barcelona, Spain. The incentives here for this campaign was to show shopping and then also traditional Barcelonian architecture. So we had a few options, and the best building was the one you see on top, kind of a tight street corner, so that was shot in 3 pieces, just to sort of capture the whole building. The art director had this really insistent idea of seeing down a street to create some volume to the picture. And he kept going back to other locations and said, hey, but what about this, what about this? Because then we can see down the street and have this sort of depth to the shot. And I often see myself as a problem solver, you know, trying to find ways to make things the way that makes sense, either visually, make things better, or solves problems for the client. And in this case, we ended up shooting a separate street just a few blocks away to create that depth that you wanted and put the parts and pieces together. And that's the final product. And the movie. So this could probably be done in lesser pieces, but the reasons for this being so elaborate as it is, but it should probably be a little slower, is that we're stuck in a street corner and we want to capture the whole building because that was important to them, so that becomes 3 pieces. There's a long exposure for that building to sort of capture that interior light, so that's probably a 15-second exposure, and prior to that we had shot the ground to cover the girl, and it was meant to be just for the girl, but in the end it felt the ground that was shot earlier with strobes felt better than the ground that was shot later with a long exposure, so that's why the ground was completely separate. And then looking at the film, the art director liked the streams of the car and that stuff, so that's why that one was put in as well. So in the end it became a way more elaborate picture than what we set out to do. So this one I showed you earlier, and I love when I get these layouts in the door, because they're, as I said earlier, they're more about creating things than taking them. And I love visual challenges. So stuff like this really turns me on. I get excited about crafting something that hasn't really been done before. Create images of worlds that doesn't really exist. It's just up my alley. With something like this, you don't really know where to start. And Steve helped me produce this, and he scouted parts of it, and then I went out on my own prior to the job and looked at some roads, looked at some parks, and then ended up at a golf course. And I put this sort of roughly together and sent it to the art director and said, hey, what about this? Is this sort of the right direction? And they said yes, and then they came out to California to shoot. And this is really funny to me, but might not be for you guys. What you hear in the background here is this grass cutter going. And here's like dead tree, and you have to sort of clear the grass around it, and went on and on and on and on. The thought process here, you know, is to start with that one unmovable thing that I talked about. In this case was the landscape and the road, and then to start layering all the other pieces on top of it. So then I have that road sorted out. You'll see the road in the picture when I show you the movie, but it's not really there at the end. But it gives me a starting point, a place to start wrapping my mind around all the different parts and pieces that goes into this. And he said, I just backed the shit out of that. Jobs like this is kind of fun because there's no sort of... That's obviously the not so happy side of that tree. It's great when you have assignments and you walk around just a few guys and craft something great rather than have the pigs or a dog and pony show with everything around. And this is 4 of us just traveling around capturing these pieces. And then of course lunch break. And now Steve is realizing that I'm filming. I have to show it. It's just fun. I think out of good times and a good crowd comes great pictures. So this is the happy side of the photograph. When you see the golf course, I started with texture out of the trees and the plants and the cityscape. On this side, we used an old picture of mine for the snowy mountains, and then we actually used stock for that smokestack sort of city. And that's the final product. And I don't know if you see there to the left, you see the snake that you saw in the video. And the parts and pieces.
Eric, do you ever look at a finished piece and wonder or notice something that you wish you would have done different from after seeing it finished now? And you're like, oh, I could have done this easier or done this better.
Yeah, all the time. So the question was, when you see finished pieces, if there's anything you would change? And yes, absolutely. Photoshop as a tool is so limitless, it never stops. And you can sit there and tweak and colors and contrast and this and that and this and that forever. And I think it's a learned discipline that at some point you just gotta say this picture is finished. But there's pictures that I come back to, even for this presentation, you know, I saw like, ooh, it seems so dark now, and I start making it brighter or the other way around. So then, however you feel when you do the retouching, this is how the picture turns out. And if you come back to it later, it definitely changes. But you gotta move on at some point, right? You can't relive the same image over and over again and create new stuff.